The day my future was stolen started with a casserole. I remember the smell of it. Too rich. Too heavy. Filling the dining room as my mother, Susan, set it on the table with that tight, brittle smile she always wore. I was 18. My bags were packed for design school. Sitting upstairs, my dad, David, cleared his throat. "Maya," he said, his voice level. "Your mother and I have made an executive family decision." I waited. He didn't look at me. "We've liquidated your tuition fund, the $60,000. He just stopped. It continued. "We gave it to Dylan. His business, Aura Collective, is in a tight spot, and it needs the capital." My mother then looked at me and said, "You should be proud to support your family. Maya, this is what sacrifice looks like." I didn't yell. I just felt the blood drain from my face. Have you ever been made to feel small so someone else could stand taller? Let me know your story down in the comments. Sacrifice. That was the word she used. As if I was a willing participant, I sat there, the smell of the casserole suddenly making me sick. And I just processed. I wasn't just angry. It was a cold, sharp clarity. Because this wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was just the final, loudest one. My whole life had been a series of holding my breath, of being the responsible one. The good investment. I thought of the last 2 years. The late nights. My eyes burning from the glow of the monitor. Meticulously crafting every single project in my portfolio until it was perfect. I remembered the adrenaline. The absolute high. When the acceptance letter from the design university came through. It wasn't just a letter, it was proof. It was the key. I thought of the scholarship that came with it. The one that matched every dollar they were supposed to contribute. I thought of the $1,800 in my savings account. Every single dollar earned from working 2 years at a coffee shop. That was my art supply money. My computer upgrade money. I don't have to ask them for anything money. And then I thought about Dylan. My older brother. Dylan. The golden child. The charismatic one. The visionary. My parents didn't just love him, they were invested in him. Like he was their one-man startup that was always on the verge of a breakthrough. I remembered his wall of failed ventures. A museum of almosts funded by my parents' checkbook. There was the year of the drop-shipped luxury watches, all fakes. Then came the disastrous crypto podcast that lasted 3 episodes. Each time he failed. My parents called it a learning experience. They'd sit at this exact table, listening to him spin his next pivot, their eyes wide with admiration. His latest venture, Aura Collective, was the masterpiece of his incompetence. A high-concept, ethical lifestyle brand that sold nothing but beautiful, empty promises. He'd burned through tens of thousands of dollars on custom packaging and a flashy office, with no actual product. And now, he needed $60,000. My $60,000. All those years, I'd get an A+, and they'd nod. That's nice. Honey, Dylan would have an idea. And they'd host a dinner party. My design work. The thing I was actually good at. The thing that had actually earned a scholarship, they called it a cute hobby. They didn't just give him my money. They took my proof. They took my key. They looked at my diligence and his recklessness. And they decided his was the one worth betting on. And they had the nerve to call it sacrifice. Susan was still talking. Something about pulling together and how Dylan would pay it all back as soon as Aura Collective took off. I didn't hear most of it, because in the space between her words, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break. It was a quiet, final click. Like a circuit breaker flipping off. The part of me that had spent 18 years trying to earn their approval, trying to be the good one, just went dark. I looked at my father, David, who was now picking at his casserole, his face a mask of reasonable financial prudence. I looked at my mother, her eyes shining with the virtue of her sacrifice. I finally understood. I wasn't their daughter. I was a resource. I placed my fork down, very gently. The sound was tiny, but in the silence, it felt like a gunshot. "I see," I said. My voice was so calm it scared me. It was a stranger's voice. Susan's smile faltered. "Maya, honey, I know this is I need to use the restroom," I said. I stood up, pushed my chair in. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked up the stairs, one foot in front of the other. I went into my bedroom, where my 2 suitcases were still neatly packed by the door, ready for a life that no longer existed. I closed the door, and I turned the lock. The click of that cheap, brassy lock was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a door closing on my entire childhood. I didn't cry. I just sank to the floor, my back against the door, and I stared at those suitcases. And in the silence, I finally understood why. It's a toxic family system. I didn't have the words for it then, but I felt the truth of it in my bones. I wasn't a person to them. I was a role. In that system, Dylan was the golden child. His role was to be the visionary, to carry all their hopes and dreams. His recklessness, his failures, none of it mattered. Because his job was to be the one who might make it big. He was the high-risk, high-reward stock they'd poured their entire identity into. And me, I was the scapegoat. No, not even that. I was the utility, the responsible one. My role wasn't to have dreams. My role was to fund my diligence, my A+s, my scholarships, my 2 years of working that wasn't for me. That was just the family's emergency fund. It was a savings bond. Sitting there, waiting to be cashed in the moment, their real investment. Dylan was in trouble. I realized, sitting on that floor, that my success was never celebrated. It was just expected. And in a weird way, it was a threat. My scholarship wasn't a victory, it was a problem. Because it gave me a path out. It gave me independence. And they couldn't have that. They had to pull me back, break my legs, and remind me of my true function to be the safety net for his trapeze act. My mother's words echoed. "You should be proud." She wasn't proud of me. She was proud of my submission. My sacrifice proved the system worked. That night, I didn't just understand that I'd lost $60,000. I understood that I had never been a daughter. I had been a backup plan, and the love I thought I was earning was just on ein voice. The snap wasn't just a moment of anger. It was my heart severing the cord. The next morning, I was gone. I left before the sun came up. I didn't leave a note. I just took my 2 suitcases, my laptop, and the $1,800 I had saved. I walked out of the house I grew up in, and I didn't look back. I didn't go to my friend Chloe's. I didn't want anyone's pity. I went straight to the city and found the cheapest, smallest studio apartment I could. It was tiny, with a window that looked directly at a brick wall, and the sound of traffic was constant, but the lock on the door was solid. It was mine. The silent counterattack wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a plan for survival. I got a job as a barista. The early shift, 4 a.m. wake-ups, the smell of burnt coffee and cleaning solution. It paid for the rent and instant noodles. And every other hour, every single one, was dedicated to my new education. I couldn't go to the design university I was accepted into, but I went to their library. I'd walk in like I belonged, find a corner cubicle, and I'd study, not art, not the cute hobbies my mother dismissed. I studied code. I studied user experience design. I reverse engineered the websites of the top digital agencies. I downloaded every free trial, read every blog, and watched hundreds of hours of tutorials on brand strategy. My rage, my humiliation. It was all just fuel now. It was crystallizing into a blueprint. I was going to build something so solid. No one could ever take it from me. But the grind is one thing. Rock bottom is another. About 4 months in, it all started to fray. The $1,800 was long gone. My barista paycheck barely covered my rent, let alone my food. A few small freelance gigs I'd found on Upwork, a $50 logo here, a $100 banner ad there, they all fell through. One client just disappeared without paying. I came home one night, my feet aching, smelling like stale coffee. I sat on my lumpy futon in my tiny, dark studio. My barista uniform was hanging on the doorknob, and I just stared at it. And this profound, heavy despair settled on me. A thick, suffocating fog. I wasn't just tired. I was paralyzed. What was I even doing? I was running on spite. And the spite was running out. That's when I felt it, the real trap. It's called learned helplessness. It's the psychological paralysis that happens after a betrayal. It's the voice that whispers. Why even try? Why build anything? It will just be taken away again. It's the feeling that no matter how hard you work, no matter how diligent you are, someone, your family, a client, the world will just show up and pull the rug out from under you. And in that moment, sitting in the dark, I was drowning in it. I saw my future a lifetime of pouring coffee, of being the girl who almost went to design school. I looked at my uniform. I thought of my mother's proud, satisfied smile, and that cold, quiet click I'd felt at the dinner table. It happened again. But this time, it was a choice. I rejected it. I refused to be a victim in my own story. I refused to let their betrayal define my future. The paralysis wasn't a life sentence. It was a symptom, and I was done being sick. The next day, I pivoted. I didn't quit my barista job, but I stopped chasing $50 gigs. Surviving wasn't enough. I needed to build. I took all the code, all the design theory I'd been studying, and I spent a solid week, no sleep, just caffeine and fury, and I built my first real asset. It was a premium, high-end UI, dividido por UX, template for design agencies, clean, intuitive, and professional. I put it on a small marketplace for $250. A week went by, nothing. Then, a notification. One sale, $250. I stared at the email. It was more than I made in 2 days at the coffee shop. 2 days later, another sale. Then another. By the end of the month, I'd made over $1,000. It wasn't $1 million, but it was a spark. And it was all mine. A year went by. The girl who'd lived on instant noodles and library Wi-Fi was gone. The barista, the scared 18-year-old, she was gone too. In her place was someone new. That single $250 template became a library, The library became a reputation. I brought in my friend, Chloe, the only person I'd kept in touch with. She handled the operations. I handled the design and strategy. We called our agency Foundry Digital. We were small. We were quiet. But we were good. The real shift happened about a year after I'd left. An email landed in my inbox from a major design agency in New York. They'd seen my template library. They offered me $120,000 for the exclusive rights. A year ago, that money would have saved my life. I stared at the offer. $120,000. I replied, "No, thank you." My heart was pounding. But I added, "I see your firm's current branding is inconsistent. For $5,000. My agency will do a full brand audit and show you what you're losing." They accepted. That $5,000 audit turned into a $20,000 project. That project turned into 3more.com now. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. And in parallel, as I was building, Dylan was imploding. I saw it. Of course. Through the grapevine, through the whispers on social media. Aura Collective was a ghost. The flashy Instagram posts had stopped. The ethical products had never launched. There were rumors of unpaid suppliers, of bounced checks. My mother's Facebook, which had once been a gushing shrine to Dylan's vision, had gone strangely, deafeningly quiet. I knew, even before the call came, that they were sinking. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in a year. Susan. I let it ring for a moment. Then, with a cold, steady hand, I answered, "Maya, honey, oh. Maya, it's so good to hear your voice." Her voice was like syrup, thick, sweet, and fake. I didn't say anything. We haven't heard from you. Honey, we've been so worried." I just waited. She cleared her throat. The fake warmth fracturing. "Listen, the reason I'm calling. Your brother, Dylan, he's working so hard. But he's having a tough time with his website. You know, the Aura Collective site. And you were always so good at that. That art stuff." I felt my knuckles turn white on my phone. Art stuff. He could really use your help. Maya. Just to get it looking professional. For the family. There it was. For the family. The same words they used to justify my execution. I let the silence stretch. I let her sit in it. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Getting nervous. "Maya, are you there?" I took a slow breath. And the voice that came out was the voice of the CEO of Foundry Digital. Not the voice of her scapegoat. "I'm busy. Susan." And I hung up. The power struggle had begun. But this time, I was the one holding all the cards. The climax didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened at my cousin Jessica's black tie wedding in a grand, historic hotel. I almost didn't go. Most of my family still saw me as the dropout, the artsy failure. But Jessica, a CEO herself, insisted, "Come, Maya. I want you there." So I went, but not as the scapegoat. I wore a sharp black suit. Clean lines and no apologies. When I walked into the ballroom, conversations seemed to dip. At the main family table sat my parents, David and Susan, and my brother, Dylan. Susan froze with her champagne mid-air. David stared like he was recalculating my entire existence. Dylan, thinner and visibly stressed, looked at me with a mix of shock and resentment. How dare I look successful? Susan started to rise, ready to fold me into the happy family performance. I simply nodded and walked past. My place card was not at their table. It was at table 9, a sponsor table among executives and business owners near the front. 10 minutes later, Dylan stormed over. "What is this?" he hissed. "Did you come with the staff or something?" I kept my gaze on my glass. "Hello, Dylan. I'm serious. Why are you at a sponsor table?" "Because I'm a sponsor," I said evenly. Foundry Digital is one of them. He frowned. "Foundry? My agency." He slid my phone toward him. On the screen, a case study titled, "From Zero, a Blueprint for Building Real Value." A calm, professional breakdown of how to build a real brand and, by implication, why his, or a collective, had failed. No names. No need. His face went pale. Then Jessica took the mic. "I want to give a special thank you to my cousin Maya," she said. "Her agency, Foundry Digital, will be handling my company's 6-figure rebrand next year." Applause. Glasses raised. Strangers smiling at me. I glanced at my family's table. My mother looked slapped. My father stared at his hands. Dylan stood frozen, my phone still in his grip. The scapegoat was gone. The next morning, I published From Zero publicly. Investors who'd seen the wedding and then read the case study pulled their funding. Aura Collective collapsed within 48 hours. Frantic texts poured in from David and Susan. I didn't respond. I didn't block them. I just silenced them. A month later, Foundry hit $80K in monthly revenue. I got an alert Aura Collective. .com had expired, so I bought it. Now, anyone who types it in lands on my From Zero case study. They didn't just underestimate me. They forgot the scapegoat was busy building the blueprint.